Hello everyone, we're here this afternoon with Patrick Cogny. He's the head of manufacturing for Genpact's global operation. And Patrick, really great to see you again.
Nice to meet you, Kirk.
And I think the first thing we want to talk about today, Patrick, is the idea of providing services in the pharma industry. Mm-hmm. It seems over the last number of years, you've talked about this with us, that there's been a real shift toward leveraging BPO resources globally. So tell us a little bit about the drivers behind that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting, we look at our industry by vertical, and pharma a few years ago was not a natural, they were doing very well. They were focused really on their pipeline, so why would they go into BPO, transforming their back office? But probably about 7-8 years ago, they started to look forward. They're really companies that plan long way ahead. Pharma companies, they have real long-term plans. And as they did that, they realized, and it's public knowledge, that they would be facing their patent cliffs. Basically, a lot of blockbuster drugs coming off patent, and meant that their revenue and their margins would suffer from that. And we saw a few companies starting embarking on saying, hey, how do we make our company more agile, more cost-effective? And how do we make sure that we can squeeze money out of the back office to be able to reinvest it in the pipeline and in the R&D? So obviously BPO was a prime way to do this. And we started to see company after company in that sector starting to go to market. Auto companies that started before that, a lot of other sectors that started before that, and they were a little bit of a new entrant at that time. And as they did that, we were very fortunate we were coming to market actually at that time. We were coming outside of GE as an independent company, independent provider at that very same time. And we're fortunate enough to be able to acquire a number of them as our clients. And today we serve 8 of the top 10 pharma companies globally. The other interesting thing about that is that they are truly global companies. So the delivery footprint for each and every one of those companies really spans the entire globe. So very, very interesting projects that we've done for them.
So how did you at Genpact and your teams ramp up to service a fairly specific, discrete industry? There's certain needs, certain requirements.
Yeah. So the way we would, we did that, and we're replicating that now in other verticals, is we started with the basic horizontal back office services, like finance and accounting, or like procurement, for example. There are some specificities of those processes in those industries, in pharma, for example. But it's only a portion of the finance and accounting which is different. The rest is similar to other industries. B, the portion which is different is very often the piece that the client wants to retain themselves, because it's very strategic, very close to their core business. So it's not outsourced. So it was easy for us to come with our very strong knowledge, for example, in finance and accounting or in procurement, or very strong track record in other industries, and bring that to bear to pharma companies. The second thing is, because we started early, the first pharma companies that outsourced were themselves new at that game. They were not looking for something very specific or bespoke. They just look for good finance and accounting expertise or procurement expertise, and we could bring that to bear. The other aspect is that we have a fairly flexible model where we don't come with a one-size-fits-all model to the client. So our whole methodology for acquiring the knowledge, moving that to our centers, allows us to capture a lot of the nuances of every client's requirements, because actually you can argue that from company to company it's also a little bit different. And last, there's one common thread in many of our industries, which is huge focus on compliance and controllership, which actually you can claim was also a driver of a lot of our industry. And with our GE heritage, we've been part of the Sarbanes-Oxley implementation at GE, for example. Very strong rigor around the way you manage your accounting, or the way you manage your procurement processes and your back office processes generally. That was a very important aspect of our expertise that we could bring to companies like Pharma, which are extremely demanding in that regard.
So it's probably safe to say that the reputation of GE in some way, and its discipline around protection of data and compliance, must have been a factor in some of these firms working with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we're very fortunate to have had that background, and we've continued to invest in that to stay cutting edge on those aspects.
What concerns then do you have, or what clients' concerns are being presented around privacy protection, especially when you're dealing with multiple locations globally, and always this constant threat of theft of intellectual property, things like that?
And you're spot on. For industries like pharma, it's very high on their radar list. So a few things. I mean, obviously, our IT systems, the protections around that are very strong. We're audited by external parties on that, so that's a very huge area of focus. A lot of communication to our employees. When I open my laptop, I've got the first thing that jumps at me is the screensaver around, data integrity, compliance, around all these things. So a lot of education we're giving to our associates. Then the management practices, one strike rules. Whoever strays, gives a password to somebody else, does any bad practice like that, there's no second chance on things like that. We give a lot of second chance on performance for people because we believe that we need to help our associates, invest in our associates to make them as productive as possible. But when it comes to integrity and compliance, there's no gray zone. One strike, basically you're out. So that's part of the culture. And then very important thing when you talk about a global footprint, we never let operating centers run on their own and manage those things on their own. We have a central audit team, for example, that audits all our centers for compliance to all these matters. They work on all the same, common minimum practices. They work on the same, operating culture, operating standards. The HR piece is exactly the same. So we are extremely, again, we invest a lot in local talent, but we make everybody operate in the same exact framework.
So looking ahead, what is the next pharma industry, and what is the next hot industry that is going to become attracted to the global outsourcing services, BPO? Is there another large industry out there that hasn't quite jumped in that pool?
So there's a number of them. The fun part of that industry is that the penetration is very low of our services by any measure you take. So there's a number of them. So I'm going to talk in my own area of responsibility. We've just done our next round of long-term planning, and we've identified a number of verticals that are going to be our focus. We see the whole energy sector as being a sector that's probably not done a lot in that area, but that is facing rising cost pressures, rising compliance constraints, and we're already working. So GE is in energy, is big time in energy, and we're working for their energy business. So that gives us a first foot in that sector. And when you look at the size of the companies in that sector, it's just huge. So we're investing right now to go after that.
Now, a lot of the analysts out there will say the other big wave eventually in the global outsourcing industry is into the small and medium-sized operation businesses. Is that on your radar as well?
So it's on our radar. It's actually an interesting thing, which is we actually cater to relatively small scale requirements today as it is. So we have clients. The industry use, and some of our competitors still won't look at a company if it's below $5 billion of revenue or something like that. Some of our clients are at $1 billion of revenue. So we've already seen that our model is actually quite flexible to scale down to maybe mid-size companies. When it comes to the next level of scaling down, we're working on models that will include the IT package with the process. In a more of a platform game. I think it's still the beginning for that, but we have solutions there, and we feel that gradually we'll be able to cover more and more of that sector.
Is that a reference to cloud computing when you talk about platform?
Yeah, I mean, cloud is a little bit of a catch-all phrase, and
right.
There's a lot of meanings to that, and it's very powerful, but there's a lot of meanings to that. I think the fundamental thing is, there's several degrees to this. The basic degree is that, I'll give you a couple examples. Actually, one example, which is we're seeing a lot of companies right now spinning off parts of their businesses to really refocus in the new environment, refocus on some of their core business. As they're spinning out those companies, they have to recreate an entire back office for the spun-off company. So first, the spun-off business is smaller. Second, it has no back office. They need to recreate it. And third, it might not have an IT system. So we're working right now with a few opportunities like that, where we're basically going to offer the combined, IT that we might be hosting and processing. Mm-hmm. And it's not something entirely new. We've done that, for example, as companies expanding in new geographies. That's another trend that we've seen. So we have some experience doing this. Now, will it be a complete one-to-many, complete platform-based, completely cloud-based? I think that's the end evolution of that. In the meantime, there can be models where we're hosting a standard IT system, but we're still configuring it to the bespoke needs of particular clients and running the operation for them. So I think there's going to be a continuum there.
Interesting. Well, Patrick, I look forward to this evolution, and we'd love to speak with you maybe in the next year or so to see how it's going. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Thanks.